Greetings, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. One, I just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like us to just take a moment. Just want to say that our gathering today is grounded in honor and respect. This month is Native American Heritage Month, and it is also the month of gratitude. So I just want us to just take a moment and consider the lands that we are on, that there were people that were here before us. There were people that were stewards of the land and loved and cherished the space in which we now call home. And in that shared space, I'd like us to just take a moment to ground ourselves. Grounding ourselves, one, in the knowledge that this is a shared space, grounding ourselves to be present and enjoying this company that we have within this digital arena, this Zoom life that we still are living, and grounding ourselves to be able to go into a discussion that often, whether it's regarding race, whether it's regarding privilege, the effects of colonialization, can be a space that is triggering, can be a space that has had harm, and also can be a space in which we can radicalize and revolutionize the experience that we've had. So I think what happens, one thing I want to just say is that we're adjusting to the technology. And so sometimes what happens is that we lose a connection. So I'm going to move forward and share this piece of knowledge that I found on social media that I think is so true. It says, "You are who your ancestors sang about in their ceremonies. You are their revolutionary prayer. You are their sacred gift to the world." And in this moment, recognizing what's happening all over the world, what has just happened in Idaho, Colorado, University of Virginia, what is happening all over, I'd like us to just take this one moment and offer a powerful meditation of love and light to the families who have lost their loved ones through acts of violence, through acts of hatred, through acts of tremendous disrespect. Let's just take a moment and send them as much love and light as we can through this space in which we share. Moving forward, I just would like to introduce myself. As Dr. Iyeli already has stated, that I am an artist, educator, visual anthropologist. I am a daughter, sister, mother, scholar, strategist, and also voodooism. I'm also the founder of the Wawawa Diaspora Center, which began as a project while I was in Benin. That was unexpected because I was in Benin really continuing a research project. The Wawawa Diaspora Center emerged as I supported many friends and professionals who came to West Africa to seek knowledge about Benin. Many were on their own spiritual pilgrimage. Some were reconnecting to ancestral lands. And Wa is a Fon word, and Fon is a language and also a people in Benin, West Africa, that means come. It means come. So Wa means come, come, come. And while I was in Benin, I often heard that term. I often heard people saying to me, come to my shop, come into my store, come and speak with me. Where are you from? And so when I thought about supporting many of us that are from the diaspora, my intention was for them to come and to be able to have a very loving and supportive experience while dealing with the trauma of healing from the results of the transatlantic slave trade. And so these are some of my students. While I was in Benin, I did become a teacher. And well, I didn't become a teacher. I became a teacher at a school, but I have over 20 years experience teaching. And in the space in which we had a chance to work together, my students, we made a short film. And the short film is called The Clotilde, the Poetic Voyage, and we finished the film in 2017. And basically, this film speaks to the history in which Benin and Mobile, Alabama were connected. There is a documentary that is on Netflix right now called The Descendants. And that documentary speaks to the history that Zora Neale Hurston documented in her book, The Barracoon. And basically what it speaks to is that late in 1859, 1860, there was a ship that left Alabama after the supposed end of the transatlantic slave trade in the United States, not the end of slavery, but the end of the actual trade. And the ship left Alabama and went to Benin, and they kidnapped 110 people. And one of those individuals was Kojo Kazula Lewis, which Zora Neale Hurston had a chance to interview and extensively learn about his experiences. If you have the opportunity to get the book, The Barracoon, if you have a chance to go and visit the sites in Alabama, if you're down that way, there's a tremendous community there of the descendants of the Clotilde ship. While I was in Benin, I was able to work on not only just that film with my students, but I was also able to work on a piece which we will be sharing tonight called African Odyssey Ancestral Memories. This film has won quite a few awards, including the Women of African Descent Film Festival, Black Laurel Films, to name a few. The other film that we're going to look at tonight is called Brooklyn to Benin, a Voodoo Pilgrimage, which is a piece that helps us to connect all of the dots, and also won quite a bit of awards. As Dr. Yele mentioned, also we have a podcast. If you're interested, we can send out the links and you can check that out. And this is the book that we have here that I think if you get a chance, I think your family would love it and tremendously enjoy it. And this is one of the projects that I've been working on that lead us to Kinfolk, Skinfolk, identifying Blackness at home and abroad. So, Skinfolk, Kinfolk. What does that phrase mean? Feel free to put into the chat what you know it to mean. What do these words conjure when you hear them? Do we know individuals who may fit this description, right? Skinfolk, kinfolk. Blackness. Is it a place, state of mind, a particular people, a set of values, ways of being, way of seeing the world? And home. Is it simply the place where one lives permanently as a member of a family or household? Is it also a spiritual place where one feels belonging? Is it a space where your ideas or attitudes are the same, similar, or at least welcomed by others who occupy the same place or space? Zora Neale Hurston, as I mentioned earlier, has been credited with this as the first time it's appeared in print, where she said, "My skin folks, but not my kinfolk." And this was taken from her excerpt of Dust Tracks on a Road, which is her autobiographical piece. And basically what Zora Neale Hurston goes into when she puts this out is she was talking about the experience that happened with some people on the New York City train. On the train, and then having the experience of other Black folks entering the train, But as they enter the train, their actions, their way of being made the others feel ashamed, made the others feel disappointed. They did not want to connect with the others because of the way in which they were acting. So when she put in this, my skin folks, but not my kin folks, we understand, for those of us within the Black and Brown experience, that she is not the first to coin the phrase. She may have been the first to print it, but this feeling is something that many of us have had. And she talks about it extensively if you get a chance to read Barracoon and the experience that the Africans, the 110 Africans that were stolen from Benin, and what their experience was as they were acclimating to their life in Alabama. So I wanted to share this piece that's called All Blacks Ain't Black, and this is from Afram News. Michael Washington wrote in an online essay, souls that inhabit white bodies can be allies and accomplices in the fight against oppression, in the same way that Black folks can be agents and accomplices in promoting, promulgating, and protecting white supremacy. As my grandmother once said, like Hurston, all your skin folk ain't kinfolk, meaning that you can inhabit a Black body and be an agent of white supremacy. Just ask the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas or any of the households of Black Americans who are more concerned with white feelings than with Black lives and bodies. Black folks don't have the market cornered on being woke, and there is no agreement about how to best actualize the potentiality of the Black community. So I just wanted to put that forward. I'm not sure exactly what you've put in the chat around that, but this is what many of us know this to be. Now, around Blackness, what does Blackness mean to those of us that are part of the African diaspora? How does Africa fit into our understanding of ourselves? Is a connection or reconnection to Africa necessary? How can we reimagine a new relationship to Africa and vice versa? How do the intersections of one's identity, culture, and history inform our personal development? What story do you hold about your racial or ethnic identity? How has that narrative evolved throughout your life? And what role does history and memory play in the formation of our own identities? Good question. You click on that for me, thank you. And so we're just gonna take a moment and get a little wisdom from Brother Muhammad Ali.
Things are getting much better, but I always wonder when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one to, I'm not just a boxer. I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying. I ask questions. I travel these countries and watch how their people live, and I learn. And I always ask my mother, I said, Mother, how come is everything white? I said, why is Jesus white with blonde hair and blue eyes? Why is the Lord's Supper all white men? Angels are white. Hope and Mary and even the angels. I said, Mother, when we die, do we go to heaven? She said, naturally we go to heaven. I said, well, what happened to all the black angels when they took the pictures? I said, oh, I know. If the white folks was in heaven too, then the black angels were in the kitchen preparing the milk and honey. I said, listen, you quit saying that, boy. I was always curious, and I always wondered why I had to die to go to heaven. Why I couldn't have pretty cars and good money and nice homes now? Why do I have to wait till I die to get milk and honey? And I said, Mama, I don't want no milk and honey. I like steaks and I said, milk and honey is a laxative anyway. Did they have a lot of bathrooms in heaven? So anyway, I was always curious. I always wondered why. You know, Tarzan is the king of the jungle in Africa. He was white. White man. I saw this white man swinging around Africa with a diaper on, hollering, oh! Do you all see Tarzan over here? Right. Tarzan? And all the Africans, so he's beating them up and breaking the lion's jaw. And here's Tarzan talking to the animals, and the Africans been there for centuries, and he can't talk to the animals. Only Tarzan can talk to the animals. I always wonder why Miss America was always white. All the beautiful brown women in America, beautiful suntans, beautiful shapes, all type complexions, but she always was white. And Miss World was always white. And Miss Universe was always white. And then they got some stuff called White House cigars, White Swan soap, King White soap, White Cloud tissue paper, White Rain hair rinse, White Tornado flow wax. Everything was white. And the angel food cake was the white cake, and the devil food cake was the chocolate cake. I said, Mama, why is everything white? I always wondered, you know, and the president lived in the White House. And Mary had a little lamb, his feet as white as snow and Snow White. And everything was white. Santa Claus was white. And everything bad was black. The little ugly duckling was a black duck. And the black cat was the bad luck. And if I threaten you, I'm going to blackmail you. I said, Mama, why don't they call it white mail? They lied too. I was always curious. And then this is when I knew something was wrong. Won the Olympic gold medal in Rome, Italy. Olympic champion, the Russian standing right here, and the Pole right here. Is Poland considered a communist country? Yeah. Yeah, I'm defeating America's so-called threats, enemies. And the flag is going, ton, 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 ton. I'm standing so proud. Ton, 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 ton. And I done whipped the world for America. Ton, 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 ton. I took my gold medal, thought I'd invented something. I said, man, I know I'm going to get my people freedom there. I'm the champion of the whole world, Olympic champion. I know I can eat downtown now. And I went downtown that day, had my big old medal on, and went to restaurants. At that time, black things weren't integrated. The black folks couldn't eat downtown. And I went downtown, I sat down, and I said, you know, a cup of coffee, hot dog. The lady said, we don't serve Negroes. I was so mad. I said, I don't eat them either. Just give me a couple of You know, I said, I'm the Olympic gold medal. 3 days ago, I fought for this country in Rome. I won the gold medal, and I'm going to eat. The manager, I heard her tell the manager, and he said, well, I'm not the man. Now he's got to go out. Anyway, I didn't raise no money. They put me out. And I had to leave that restaurant in my hometown where I went to church and served in their Christianity and fought and daddy fought in all the wars. Just wanted to go medal and couldn't eat downtown. I said, something's wrong.
Thank you. So I say thank you to our ancestor Muhammad Ali, because he always spoke his truth. If there's anything in studying or learning about Muhammad Ali, was that he took what he learned and immediately transformed himself in that space. So as he was questing, he was also putting it forward to all of us, right? So basically, I wanted to share that because what he was saying at that time, like, let's think about it. We're not talking about 2022. What he was speaking to when we think about what Blackness meant, right? What he was speaking to were the challenges that he had, that though there was pride that he had, there was an outer perception of Blackness that actually kept him from being able to fully participate in a society, in a country in which he was engaged for the upliftment of the country, right? So thinking about him as an athlete, winning the gold medal, doing everything within his physical, mental, spiritual self to beat the opponent, and then to return to his home state, his home country, his home state, his hometown, and being denied to be able to just sit down and eat. Also, when we think about home, right? Home is a safe haven and a comfort zone. And what Muhammad Ali was talking about was that there was this juxtaposition in acceptance. Was his blackness accepted at home? A space where one feels welcomed, appreciated, seen, and acknowledged. A place to live with our families, pets, plants, books, and other personal belongings. A space to share and enjoy with friends. A space to build memories as well as to build future wealth. A space where we can truly just be ourselves. Do we feel at home wherever we are? Do we feel at home within the space, whether it's our apartment, whether it's a house, whether it's our igloo, our tent? Do we feel more accepted here, or do we have to go other places to be seen, to be welcomed, to be trusted, to not be targeted, to not be harmed? There it is. It kind of disappears, right? Okay, well, that's good. All right. So I wanted to share this quote from Bell Hooks, another great ancestor. She says, historically, African-American people believe that the construction of a home place, however fragile and tenuous, slave hut, the wooden shack, had a radical dimension. One's home place was the one site where one could freely construct the issue of humanization, where one could resist. Black women resisted by making homes where all Black people could strive to be subjects, not objects, where we could be affirmed in our minds and hearts despite poverty, hardship, and deprivation, where we could restore to ourselves the dignity denied us on the outside in the public world, which was exactly what Muhammad Ali was speaking to when he was talking about Blackness and the perception of Blackness and not being able to be fully accepted even within his own hometown. And this excerpt is from Home Place, a Site of Resistance, an essay that was published in Yearning Race, Gender, and Cultural Politics. It works when we don't want it to. There it is, right there. Yeah. So I wanted to share this piece because this is a diagram that allows us to look at from the individual to the systemic. Individual person's belief and actions that serve to perpetuate oppression that's possible, right? Conscious and unconscious, externalized and internalized. And this diagram specifically that is not introduced, right, is a diagram that looks at the lens of systemic oppression. And this is from the National Equity Project. So on an individual level, a person's beliefs and actions that serve to perpetuate oppression, the interpersonal, the interactions between people, both within and across difference, and then the systemic part is the institutional and the structural. Policies and practices at an organization or sector level that perpetuate oppression, and the structural, how these effects interact and accumulate across institutions and across history. When we think about skinfolk, kinfolk, when we think about Blackness, and we think about home, for many of us, there's a place in which acceptance or lack thereof, even the space in which we're not even able to purchase the home or be able to be in places, right? We understand in the United States, there's a history of redlining. So when we think of home, we think about the place in which we want to raise our family. When we think about the big movement of 2020, the big Black Lives Movement that emerged from a very violent place in which people witnessed the murder of George Floyd. When we think about the places of oppression that keep us from being able to be free, actualized, loving human beings. There it is. Yep, right there. Okay, there, yep. All right, okay, thank you. And so I wanted to share this concept from W.E.B. Du Bois, from Souls of Black Folk. And it's called double consciousness, right? And Du Bois says that, quote, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of the world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength and alone keeps it from being torn asunder." Thank you. And so this complexity of identity is very much something that I know about. The photograph on your left is a photograph of myself with my sister, my older sister, Ingrid. And we're in Haiti. And on the other side is the image of me in Brooklyn, photographed by Pedro Carter. The other photograph was from Abram Photos in Haiti, which was a popular place where many people went to get photographs taken. When Du Bois talks about this complex space in which many of us born here deal with, which is this double consciousness, there is even another complex space in which, for those of us that have connections, not only to this land, to this country, but then to another, right? So not only am I seeing myself growing up in Prince George's County, in Laurel, Maryland, born in DC, the outside world sees me as African American, but my first language was not even English. My first language was Creole, second was French, and third was English. So this space in which I am trying to understand who I am, I'm trying to understand myself. I'm trying to understand those that have the same skin as me, but yet culturally we are not connected. The space in which my parents have their own biases to other Blacks because of what they've been told through the media about Black Americans, and then the space of bias that Black Americans have to Black immigrants, whether from the Caribbean or from Africa or from someplace else. And yet here I am as a little person trying to navigate that space, trying to find a place that I call home. So this is a photograph that I took in Benin, West Africa. And this is a quote from Zora Neale Hurston. She says, "I belong to no race nor time. I am the eternal feminine with its string of beads." And so we're going to now go into a space where we're going to watch two short films. And these films center multidimensional perspectives of culture and traditions between the Black diaspora and Africa from a Haitian-American perspective. These two short films invite all to explore issues of Blackness, race, representation, religion, spiritual traditions, home, belonging, and memory, while bringing into sharp focus the importance of identity, culture, and history in the telling of Black people's stories.
I know that our story did not end at these shores. My standing here bears witness to the love, strength, and determination of my people. I am part of the story that goes beyond this history, and I am proof that we endured. Nula.
Mika kwa bia na ikugba ji mi le o. Mika kwa bia ni chinukusu. Mika kwa bia sanfon weji. Mika kwa bia gbada weji. Mika kwa bia lo kunsanre. Mika kwa bia lo konbori kwe. Mika kwa bia lo kumbore ko gba le fi obi. Mika kwa bia lo kumbore to sa fi obi. Mika kwa bia nta sino lo to sa fi obi. Mika kwa bia se ko ji ejijo. Mika kwa bia na hospital ko le fi obi. O kan kwa bia se ko ji ejijo. Mika kwa bia ni budu bato. Mika kwa bia ni budu siyan. Mika kwa bia ni zunto. Mika kwa bia se bo isapa lu kuwa.
A daughter born on the other side of the water returns, delving into depths of an ancient cascade of memory, myth, and magic. The transatlantic slave trade, with its forced migration of millions of Africans taken out of their homes and into the New World, brought with them their traditions and their gods. Voodoo is a religion. Voodoo is a spiritual practice. It is an ancient traditional West African religion that originates with the Fan of Benin and the Ewe of Togo.
Dans Balawedo, c'est bon, c'est bon. Aïda Wedo, c'est bon, c'est bon. Dans Balawedo, c'est bon, c'est bon. Aïda Wedo, c'est bon, c'est bon. Les mammouths échouent moins que mon cas crié. Les mammouths échouent moins que mon cas crié. Les mammouths échouent moins que mon cas crié. Dans Balawedo.
Voodoo derives from the Fon language expression of vo bo don, which means draw energy from the source of creation fearlessly, and to honor your God fearlessly. My travels in Benin from Savalu to Ouida explore the depths, the connections that Voodoo has to nature, and the divinity that we have within ourselves. The spiritual practices of Voodoo are grounded in a monotheistic faith with intermediary deities, angels, spirits, lois that serve as guides for humans. The spirits were created by the Almighty to communicate with humans on a regular basis. The spirits can be contacted through possession and divination. And at such time, they offer messages, warnings, and blessings from the spiritual world. Voodoo is an action plan, a spiritual and physical guide to everyday survival. For every aspect of the human condition, there is a path, and voodoo offers a guide. Voodoo was here before me, and it will be here after me. I pay my respects to the ways of my ancestors, give thanks that we have not lost our sacred knowledge, traditions, songs, and dances. Voodoo, c'est bon. Aïe bobo.
Right there, just stop. All right. First of all, can we talk about how beautiful all of this is, though? Can we talk about it? I'm in a trance. I'm trying to come back out of the trance, y'all, because these beautiful, delicious, colorful, juicy, spirit-filled images like took me someplace. It's giving me my voice back. I haven't had a voice for over a week now, so this is like my first time speaking in public in a long time. So I'm just excited. I know you have more things to say. I don't want to interrupt the flow of it all, but this is my first time seeing your work in a space like this. Yes. Chat, please, family, just put in the chat how that landed with you. Just first reactions. I'm just interested in what comes to mind with these two pieces that we were just able to see. We're privileged to see. And while you all are thinking about that, we'll get back to you. Well, I wanted us to just stop here. Oh, all right. Yeah. Yeah. I think just to stop here and just hear, I guess I'd love to hear from folks in the chat, or if they want to come off and unmute themselves, and how this landed in the sense of when we're thinking about identifying Blackness at home and abroad. What does it mean to make a connection to a land, right, that was engaged in the active sale of our ancestors, for those of us born in the diaspora? How do we reconnect? Do we? Should we? Right? And so these two films were from a Haitian-American perspective. The first film was the short film that was done, director Emeka Anozie and Kathleen Antoine Abiala, the executive producer. That was her story as she came to Benin on a Wawa Diaspora Center experience. And I have to tell you that first film was shot exclusively on a mobile phone. What? When we think about how powerful it is to tell our stories, and we often think well, I can't, I gotta get a grant, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. I have to do all these things to be able to actualize a vision. That is not necessarily true. What started as documenting her tour, her visit to first time to Benin, we decided collectively to move forward into a short narrative piece of her connection to a land, knowing that her, many Haitians are from the kingdom of Dahomey, right? And Benin was a part of that kingdom. Where actually the traditional name was Dahomey, and then we had the division of Africa as the Europeans came in, right? And so this was very much her story and telling of her connection and her being able to see a space in which home could be there. And also home can also be many other places, right? Still making a connection past the trauma. And then the second piece was specifically looking at a connection with a spiritual practice that is grounded in West Africa and that traveled with the captured and enslaved Africans and grew in the diaspora. The expression of voodoo from Haiti to New Orleans to Prince George's County, Largo, Maryland, right? It has survived. And so a big part of the work that I did within that film was really looking at the survival of voodoo. And so I'll just end there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to just make sure we give her a virtual clap. If you can, just put up a reaction. In person, I'm definitely clapping. Thank you, Prince Aziz Hunt. I see you in the chat. Prince Aziz wrote calmness in understanding and the discovery of identity in the chat. Mm-hmm. Calmness is definitely something I felt while watching it. And I think for you to tackle and give us such a very clear definition of these traditions, of Vodou specifically, it's very useful in that way. I'm thinking as a teacher, as an educator, for people who are completely unfamiliar, for whom, we've been taught that these religious traditions of our ancestors are demonic and horrible and something evil, to give a sense of calm at the same time and a sense of deep devotion and spirituality. I was like, yes, this is the vibe. This is what I feel as someone who participates in this tradition, but that's not the general understanding out in the world. So I think this is useful for that. Miriam Machado, who says, Mimi, who is one of our PGCC family, says belonging is something I felt watching your film. Brava. So yes, I echo that. I definitely felt.
Thank you, Mimi.
Thanks, Mimi.
I haven't seen her in years. It's so nice to see her here on the chat.
Yes, and Mimi will be the one helping us to get this beautiful presentation up and on PGCC TV, on our YouTube channel. So everybody look out for that. Please share it when it comes out. And yeah, absolutely, it's also grounded in these traditions. So belonging. Only B is that I also had interest in where my people were from before here. Quotes. The really interesting thing is that one of the major aspects of my spiritual path deviated from my DNA. Well, it happened. It happened. What's your response?
Well, I think that for many, being able to make a connection, like there is a desire for many of us to see where we are from, and so the DNA test sometimes will tell us that we are from here or from there. But really, I think that when we think about what belonging is where your heart is. And so there are many of us that may do a DNA test and still have a tremendous connection to Buddhism, right? And there may be nowhere within our DNA because within the practice of it and in the important space of having choice, right? That is what I think is most important. For many of us, our choice was taken on our ancestors, on an ancestral level. The choice to be able to worship was not something that we had. And the reason why I hail up IET and also these two perspectives as Haitian-Americans, and as the first film mentioned, that Toussaint Louverture's people were from Alada, right? And then also understanding the connection of Papa Dessalines, our Haiti's first emperor, right? Was that also he was trained by someone who descended from the Dahomean women warriors. If you saw the film Woman King, right? There is a direct connection to that story to Haiti's revolution. And what's important in understanding Haiti's revolution was the place that was made in acknowledging their own God consciousness. To be able to be free and to be fully yourself means that you first need to be able to look at yourself, see yourself, love yourself as you are, and then also to be able to recognize the space in which you want to celebrate your own connection to the Creator. If that is your road, you could be atheist, you could be whatever it is, but first understanding that you have choice and that agency, that place in which many of us have today, our ancestors did not have. And when the Haitian Revolution was significant because first their grounding was spiritual. It was a spiritual foundation that fueled the Haitian Revolution that allowed for freedom there and for freedom to move into other spaces that Africans were enslaved and captured.
You have given one of our participants chills. Once again, every time this person sees your films. And so, and even from just what you said, it's amazing as, I think as a historian, I see those connections, you know, I'm like, oh, okay, Woman King is, you know, on some level, many levels, a historical fiction, but what the thread from there that we can pull into our own reality here in the Americas is a woman like that was brought to Saint Domingue and taught this young man a certain set of skills and a groundedness in who he was and the fact that he's a human and he deserves to be free, and gave him what he needed to fight for it and to organize other people to fight for it.
Yes.
And that's why we have the Haitian Revolution. That is why it's successful.
And her name was Aunt Toya.
Toya.
Yes, Aunt Toya. So just to say her name, and also to recognize that Magali, I want to say thank you to Magali, because Magali served as one of our translators when we were in Benin and getting the film translated into French, the first film by Kathleen. I also want to hail up and recognize others that are on here, to one of my first teachers in the spiritual tradition, which is Oshun Yoyin Alake, and to her husband, Baba Ngoma Hill, two phenomenal human beings and poets that if you don't know their work, you should know their work. And also shouting out my teacher, Baba Zach Kondo at Bowie State University, Nana Kwabena, and to the community that has supported me from Prince George's County to all over the world. I say thank you.
Yes, many thanks, Modupe, and all the other greetings of thanks and gratitude. It's so funny. So this is my first time meeting Regine in the flesh, but we have a lot of the same teachers and mentors. So if you're interested, they're in the chat. Please reach out to these amazing folks. Certainly Oshioyin and Baba Ngoma are in the chat, Ngoma Hill. And which is why I know she knows what she's talking about. Thank you. Vice President, Dr. Rachel Bonaparte is on the chat. Thank you. She's in the meeting. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Dr. Bonaparte for helping us to get the grant, the funding to make the Black Culture Matters series possible. So I just want to shout you out as well and give you my deep thanks for this. She says both films were excellent. The first one really resonated with me, especially as a Ghanaian Trinity American. Yeah. Discussion on double conscious powerful. Thank you. Absolutely. I think that's really an important segue into a question I had. And if you have questions that come up for you, have questions for our presenter, please put them in the chat now. We'll try to kind of knock through them. But selfishly, I'm going to take the first crack at questions. A song that I was hearing in my head the whole time was a Gil Scott-Heron song called Home is Where the Hatred Is. And it brought me back to Dr. Bonaparte's question about double consciousness. Home, and also even in the first film where she was dealing and wrestling with perhaps being at a place called home that felt like home, a place you associate with freedom, being back in Africa finally, but also knowing that this is the place where the captivity began. This is where the violence began. This is where the freedom was disrupted. It's the place, it's a site of trauma at the same time. You know, home is where the trauma is, home is where the love is, but also in some ways the trauma and the violence. So how do you suggest that we reconcile this, and how does art help us do that?
Well, I think that one of the things that for myself as an artist is it's a connection to spirit. So though can be, and many of us coexist within a space of trauma, like literally, if you turn on the news at any moment, you can be triggered, right? You can be triggered just by hearing what happened here, what happened there, right? But I think that what's important, and what I realized for myself when I've gone into spaces of sadness, depression, is that I have not grounded myself within my own spiritual work, right? When we fall off, when we feel lost, when we feel disconnected, and specifically for myself, I realize that I am not in my highest meditation. And also there's a place of letting go. As an artist, to be able to hear the messages that come, to be able to sit in stillness and to be in that creative mode, is to be able to serve as a conduit. Most artists will tell you that I had an idea that it was going to be, but I didn't know it would be this, right? So there's a place where we understand the ignition, which is we are, right? Where the ignition is us, but then allowing the space for spirit, for other community also to guide us and to help us in the creation. There's a really wonderful piece by Osunyoyin Alake in Diaspora Diaries where she speaks about art. And the piece is called, I'm going to share with you the piece because I think it's amazing. It is called Home Here, African Art in the Diaspora. And that is a piece, if you're able to get a copy of Diaspora Diaries, it's pretty much, I think, out of print. And this was a book that Diaspora Diaries, an educator's guide to Mokata artists. If you reach out to the Mokata Museum in Brooklyn, New York, at one time I served as a director of education and I served as the editor of this book. And there's a powerful piece there by Iya Osunyoyin Alake, really delving into the importance of art here in the diaspora and connecting it to the continent.
I have a copy of that book. At some point, maybe I'll bring it out. We can have access to a gorgeous book with poetry, obviously, photography, just amazing pieces, all kinds of amazing artists throughout the diaspora. So it is a treasure. It's a chain that's so rare, but it is really. I didn't see, and you were. It's yeah. So I guess following that thread a little further, I wanted to know your thoughts on the connection between Blackness and spirituality. The Skinfolk, the Kinfolk. How do we? Because some people I think are kind of avoidant of trying to falling into this trope that all Black people are just churchy, religious, spiritual, spooky, superstitious. But spirituality is kind of a theme, a guiding principle throughout all of your work. Would you disagree with that statement? Is that something you think we should embrace about Blackness as a whole? What's the connection between Blackness and spirituality from your vantage point?
Well, Blackness is the beginning of life. That's it. So everything can come from it. So at the core, it is the beginning, right? We understand that creation began on the continent of Africa. At one time, it was called Abyssinia, right? It was known as the Dark Continent. One of my favorite bands, Midnight, has a part where he taught. He's now deceased, but there's a really powerful part of the song where he talks about that from the darkness comes the light. And so within that space, we are everything. We are everything. So if we decide to allow that spiritual part of us to guide us in our life, if we decide that that's not our road and we want to be atheists or we want to be, that's the choice that we have. But the reality is that within all of it, within Blackness is everything. I mean, that's how I see it. And I'd love to hear from folks in the chat for how they see it. But I understand that that the choice is ours. Choice, right? The choice is ours. There is a responsibility with greater knowledge and understanding. And so for many of us that are reluctant in that space of responsibility, that may be part of the reason why we make the choices that we do. But I think that whether we look at Christianity, whether we look at Islam, whatever spiritual religious place, there is always going to be a space in which we see Black and brown bodies. I have this conversation often, with my partner, and I tell him when we're looking at films, I was like, this is always going to be the Black person, right? The Black person is going to be the one that comes in with the intuition, may not be respected, but is the one that kind of saves the day. Right, exactly. That magical Negro, and that unfortunately it has become a trope. But really, when we think about it, we are magic. That is what most of us sometimes, not most of us, but many of us may forget. That the ignition, the shift that we want to have in our lives is for us to ignite, right? And then also we recognize when we are not feeling strong, that we do have community that can support us, that can help us to shift that. But first we have to know what to ask for.
That's so interesting. I'm thinking about, okay, so this is how my brain works. I'm having a weird parallel between the trope of Black people as magical, the magical darkies, the magical Negroes, as they call them in film criticism, and then watermelon as another stereotype that we kind of run away from. But in essence, if we're embracing our ancestors and the brilliance and ingenuity of who they were, it's something we should embrace. I know elders in my family who won't eat watermelon, certainly not when white folks are around, because these things have literally been called nigger apples. They've been over associated with Black people, and somehow because of that over association, we have run from watermelon. Now, I love watermelon.
Right.
But if we think about the plant itself, the fruit itself, and how it helped us to survive, because our ancestors figured out it could grow well between rows of cotton in that specific type of soil, and it helped us to keep ourselves hydrated under hot sun and hard labor and no sense of protecting our humanity and our well-being. Without the watermelon, where are we, right? And I think that is possibly true for spirituality. Who are we without it? How did we make it here without it, right? How did we go through the horrors of the transatlantic trade and enslaved Africans, through the horrors of slavery, through the horrors of colonization, even on that other side of the Atlantic, without a connection to something deeper, more meaningful, beyond, around, through, up, in, infused with ourselves?
Well, I think for some of us, the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade haven't left us, right? Like the reality is that though we are no longer enslaved, we are enslaved to the ideas that allowed the transatlantic slave trade to thrive, right? So when we think about what does it mean to be in a space, and I think there's a comment in the chat I wanted to just, Shameen Jackson. Hi, Shameen. She says, Blackness, but not community with all Blackness, that it isn't connected to a high capital or adjacent to whiteness, that there's a space in which being able to be ourselves means that we are not always welcome in certain spaces because of the state of white misanthropy, right? There is a space in which we are dealing with an active hatred. We have to protect ourselves from the ideas that are planted deep within us. And the space in which things automatically will come out. And we're like, wow, did I say that? Where's that coming from? Did it come from how we were raised, by our parents trying to protect us? Did it come from when we went over in our sorority or fraternity? Did it come from things that the pastor said? Does it come from the white Jesus that we saw in all of our homes? Where are we in the sense of creating our own identity, and in a space in which we're able to heal from these collective traumas that unfortunately have not ended?
Absolutely, right.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that that's what's so beautiful about the idea that we can choose, and at least the struggle has brought us to the point where, to some degree, we can at least choose who we are as spiritual beings, as practitioners, as
absolutely
devoted to something, or not, or choose nothing. Right? Blackness is all of the things, and it's also going to be none of the things. But there's choice there now.
There is choice there.
John Henry Clark talked beautifully about being from the diaspora, and how because we're not all privy to, because we've been robbed of always knowing the specific parts of Africa came from, on both our mother and father's side, right? Both of our parents. Sometimes we do our DNA, we only get one half of the story,
right?
Truly and sincerely. So maybe on the other half of your DNA are the places where your spiritual practice, your true calling rests, And so he said, because we have been robbed of that, it gave us the freedom to see and associate with the whole of the African, the whole of the continent of Africa. We can really claim all of it, any of it, parts of it, what resonates to us, and we get an opportunity to really explore that and see what meaning we can find in a variety of practices. And like you said, Black folks are in everything. Practice
everything, right? And so with that, and also even understanding the fact that if we understand that, if we recognize the cradle of civilization, that everything else is Africa's daughter, son, child. So original traditional African religion is the mother. That's the core. Everything else, all of our other practices descended from that. So if nothing else, even in whatever it is that we choose to practice or not practice, always respect the mother.
Period. I like that. I think again, I'm always going to see this and try to offer this. Obviously, I'm grounded in culture and art, but I'm looking for patterns, and I'm looking to trace the genealogy of a thing back to the mother. Where does it start? What are the components that we find meaningful in this moment? But where did it come from? Where did it start? Do we really know what it is we're doing? And can we find a way to look back so that we can at least find that respect?
Right.
We have to be grounded and understand the origins to find the kind of like grasp that respect that we should have for these things.
And that was part of the journey of Brooklyn to Benin. As Dr. Bonaparte mentioned, she's Trinidadian, right? So even there in Trinidad, there's the practice of the Shango Baptist, right? And that syncretism of the Christianity, very much grounded though in Black spiritual traditions from West Africa. And that where we find Black people in whatever expression, it still returns to that very a traditional way of connecting with spirit.
Absolutely. In questions, we have a student in the audience here.
What exactly inspired your roots and your youth?
She's asked what inspired Regine's roots in Benin, what inspired her to go there, physically go there.
So so many of us, right, we don't know exactly where our people come from, right? My family is from Haiti. Within the Haitian tradition, specifically the spiritual tradition, we call out the nations that we are from. See, what many people don't understand is that the survival of traditional African religions in the Americas allows us to know where we may be from, right? Or where we are connected to. So within the Vodou tradition in Haiti, we call out the Igbo, right? We have rhythms, traditional rhythm, drum rhythms that come from there. We call out the Nago nation, right? Nago rhythms. We call out the Yoruba. Each of those are from different nations in West Africa. And Benin is a name that emerged after colonialization from the French and the British, right? But the larger empire was Dahomey. And so many Haitians, in their pilgrimage to their selves, to their connection, and within their connection to Africa, Benin is often a place that we stop. Because we know that Toussaint Louverture, one of our founding fathers, was from Alada. That is in Benin. We know that Tantoya was from there. She was descendant of the Dahomean warrior women, right? So in that space of just knowing that part of my history, that's what took me to the end of a journey. The journey, Brooklyn to Benin, is I started in my Brooklyn community, looking at the survival of Vodou. And in that, I did a road trip and went down into New Orleans, then went and traveled to other parts of the US, and then went to Mexico, and then went to Belize. All of those were kind of highlighted in the film. And then I wanted to return to the source. What many people don't know is that though traditional African religion can be found in every country, Benin is the only country on the continent that has a national holiday in which everyone is off, right? So like we got off for Veterans Day on the 11th, we get off for President's Day, right? Benin honors their tradition in a way that is very tangible, right? And so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go. I went to the Vodou Festival. That was the beginning of the journey. I went to Benin just to be there for a couple of months and ended up staying 2 years. Yeah.
They locked you in there for a while.
Yeah.
That's good. So I didn't realize Benin had a national traditional religious holiday.
Yeah. January 10th.
Okay.
Vodou Day.
Vodou Day. Mm-hmm. I want to go to the big Vodou Festival in Benin at some point. It's on my bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at a nation like Haiti, like Catholicism is their official religion, yes. Right? And I heard you, like as you talked and you were answering the students' question. What's your name? I'm sorry.
Madison.
Madison. How'd you hear about our event, Madison?
I was at the last event. So.
Yeah.
But the thing that kept coming up for me is how even though we have over time had Christianity and to some degrees Islam as imposed religions, as imperialist religions, as religions of colonizers and enslavers, and we've found ways to embrace and beautify and kind of build out these traditions to Africanize them and make them more meaningful for ourselves. There are things that were lost, and that sometimes these traditional religions in the diaspora, these diaspora versions of religion, putting together a people in Nago and Yoruba into Vodou, right, and making this new diaspora religion out of it. These are like repositories holding like containers for where we came from. If you can't get to the DNA test, but you learned the nation songs of all the nations that were called. At least 10 you can choose from to start your investigation and figure out. And that's the beauty of culture. It's a container for who we were, even if the official record pushes us away from it, even if these other imposed religions push us away from it and kind of erase our memories. This is where we find our memory. We recover it.
Absolutely. When I arrived in Saint-Valu, which is where I participated in the Vodou Festival, the Vodou Festival happens throughout the country, right? So many people know about Ouida because there's a big festival there and the BBC and others will cover it. I was in Saint-Valu, which is as you go a little bit further north. It's not northern Benin, but it's kind of not quite the midpoint, but north of the capital. The first spiritual house that I went to was a Nago house. And the first place that I went to was the shrine of Ogu. Ogu is the father of Haiti. Urzuli is her mother. So for me to land on the continent and that spirit first take me to his house, to the spirit house, right? We often personify these deities. They really are genderless, right? But as humans, these are the things that we do. That was where I first landed. And so it was very powerful and very emotional to hear the songs, the Nago songs, to meet people that are of the Nago nation, which Haiti in her fight for survival has kept homage to, right? And to be there, and in parts of the film, we are at the shrine. That's the space where you see people singing, the women are singing, and then there's a space in which everyone is bowing their head and touching the ground, right? And they are in front of an Ogu shrine. And so that was very powerful. And it's not anything that I would have predicted or have known. And so when you talk about that space of allowing ourselves to just be, like when we allow spirit to work, it works, right?
Yes. So, okay, from a cinematography perspective, did you do something to kind of colorize the film? Because it was just like colors were a popping. I don't know if it was just me. I don't know if anybody in the chat is feeling me on this. I was just like, everything looked so vivid. It was like extra blue, red was extra red. Was that just?
Well, the one thing is that,
That's like that over there.
Yeah, well, the red dirt, the scene that we are on right now, that road is the road of the slave. This road is where captured Africans had to walk in chains. This is the path, this is an aerial view, all the way further to the ocean. So the beginning of this is Ouida, right? Like we're in Ouida. This is all Ouida, right? So Ouida is a port city in Benin. And so this is where they had to walk. And so when I thought about the reason why the film kind of has this overlay, right? It has me walking through the door of no return, but it also has this overlay of this road, because this is where some of my ancestors had to walk down this road. And so the return of home, the return connection in the sense of spiritual is the return. It is important to note that for anyone to be able to return, any of us that are from the diaspora, that were stolen, it is important that we take the journey, that we break the myth of white misanthropy, the myth in which we were told we would never return, the spells that were cast, the witchcraft that was done to make us hate home, to make us feel we would never be able to return. It is important to stand on that land. And when you stand on that land, you call out your ancestors' names.
Family, this is real. This is real, and I imagine that Regine has been touched by her ancestors in this place. And that she's brought them back. She's brought them with her. She went, defied all of the white witchcraft, yes, that was put in place to prevent us, to block us from seeing ourselves clearly and from returning to our ancestral home. And now they are with her. She has reclaimed them.
I think when we think about the negative perception of voodoo, and we think that voodoo is witchcraft, that's witchcraft within itself. The fact that you don't know yourself, you don't know, you are afraid of something someone else has told you, but in essence, it is traditional African religion that has allowed us to be present today. If it was not for those that could interpret dreams, if it was not for those that could say, hey, wait a minute, well, I don't know this plant, but then spirit speak to them and say, put this plant on the wounds of those whipped and hurt and raped. Where do you think that wisdom came from? Like literally, how did we survive in a land that we did not know? That was spirit, literally speaking to our ancestors in dreams, helping us to find the plants, to understand how to take out those that called themselves masters. When you think about the story of Nat Turner, that was not a crazy Black man. That was a man that was inspired, following spirit, and knowing it was important to burn down everything. There's an expression within IET that is "Kupe tset bule kai." Cut the heads, burn the houses. And I say that to each of you tonight. Cut the heads off of all that which does not serve you and burn the houses that keep you enslaved.
Well, I don't have anything to add to that. I'll leave that with everyone. A road goes in both directions, family.
Yeah, sure.
Be sure that as we are leaving and going back into our normal lives this evening and beyond, that we seek our roadways, our pathways to ourselves, to our ancestors, to our people. I hope we've done a little bit of opening up some roads this evening. We look forward to seeing you next semester with more events from the African American Studies Institute. We have talked about reggae and dance hall and politics. We have talked about African dance and how our bodies remember ancestral dances we've been doing for hundreds of years, even on TikTok. And now we have talked about how to reclaim our ancestors, reclaim our spirituality, reclaim our Blackness, to love ourselves as humans, to fight for our justice, radically, unafraid, through our spirituality, through art. And I appreciate you all for joining us once again. Please stay tuned, and good night.
Good night. Yes, good night. Are we doing part two?
Yes, oh, everyone, if you're still on, I urge you to go to see the Africana art collection. I'm gonna put it in the chat right quick if you're still on. I forgot about that because I was kind of caught up. It's pgcc.edu/arts. If you can't get there, you can just go to the main page, pgcc.edu, and type in Africana art collection. And scroll down to enter gallery, take a look around at the art pieces, and I want you to just ask yourself as you look at the art, which pieces represent home? Which pieces present alienation? Which pieces represent spirit? Which pieces represent what it means to be African or Black? Stay in touch, please. I'm gonna have the in-person folks walk me over to the gallery in person. If you get a chance to see it in person, it'd be great. Come on campus, Center for Performing Arts. It's right there in the lobby. The gallery's right there for you. We're gonna go do some discussion in the gallery. So we'll see you next time.